The microphone echoed as my father's retirement speech exposed my most humiliating secret to 500 colleagues. I smiled through tears, knowing in 3 days he'd discover the flash drive I'd hidden in his retirement gift, containing proof of what he'd done to our family. Before I dive into the most painful chapter of my life, I'm curious. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you? I still remember shaking as I uploaded those files, wondering if family loyalty should trump personal dignity. If this story resonates with you at all, please hit subscribe so we can share these difficult family journeys together. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I was always Rick Mitchell's daughter before I was Sarah. For 35 years, I lived in the shadow of my father's towering reputation at Westmore Financial Group. Rick wasn't just any financial executive, he was the Richard Mitchell, the man who transformed a regional investment firm into a national powerhouse through sheer force of will and ruthless determination. Growing up, our sprawling colonial house in Connecticut was filled with awards bearing his name. The study walls were covered with photos of him shaking hands with politicians and business titans. What those walls never displayed were my academic certificates or art competition ribbons. Those were participation trophies, according to my father, not worthy of wall space. Finance is the only field worth pursuing, he'd tell me while reviewing my high school course selections. Art history? Literature? What are you going to do with that, Sarah? Wait tables? When I expressed interest in journalism during my sophomore year of college, he cut my spending money until I switched my major to business. I'm not paying $60,000 a year for you to chase some creative fantasy, he said over the phone. I remember sitting on my dorm room floor crying as I changed my class schedule. After completing my MBA from Wharton, the only university he deemed acceptable, I had dreams of working for a marketing agency in New York. I had interviews lined up with top firms, my portfolio polished to perfection. Why waste your degree at some trendy marketing shop when I can get you a position at Westmore? He asked during Sunday dinner, not really asking. James didn't need convincing. James, my brother, 3 years younger, was always the golden child. While I graduated summa cum laude, James barely managed a 3.0 from state. Yet somehow, he was already on the executive track at Westmore within a year of graduating. Meanwhile, I was placed in the marketing department, a division my father openly referred to as the colouring book department during executive meetings. My mother Elizabeth might have protected me from the worst of his criticism. I have faint memories of her gentle redirections during dinner when Dad would start critiquing my weight or my grades. Rick, tell Sarah about that new client you impressed. Today, she would say, steering the conversation to safer ground. But breast cancer took her when I was 15, and after that, there was no buffer between my father's expectations and my reality. I remember the first marketing campaign I developed for Westmore's new retirement portfolio. I'd worked 80-hour weeks, coordinating with designers and copywriters to create something modern yet trustworthy. The executive team loved it, all, except my father. It looks like every other financial ad out there, he announced in the boardroom. Sarah, I expected more creativity from you, given how much you fought to study those artsy subjects. I sat there, 26 years old, being dressed down like a child in front of senior leadership. That night, I called my first therapy appointment with Dr. Wilson. What brings you here today? Dr. Wilson asked during our initial session. I need to learn how to please my father, I answered. She gave me a sad smile. Perhaps we should focus on learning how to please yourself first. Over 7 years of therapy, I started to understand the patterns, the teachable moments where my father would point out my flaws in public settings, family gatherings, dinner parties, office meetings, how he'd frame his criticism as helpful guidance, making me the unreasonable one if I showed any hurt or anger. I'm just trying to help you grow, he'd say. Don't be so sensitive. Despite everything, I worked my arse off at Westmore. I developed award-winning campaigns that increased client acquisition by 37%. I innovated our digital marketing strategy, bringing in younger investors who typically avoided traditional financial institutions. Last month, I was finally promoted to marketing director after my predecessor retired. The promotion should have been a moment of validation. Instead, my father's first comment was, "Congratulations," though I suppose someone had to get the position. 2 days after my promotion, Westmore announced my father's retirement. 45 years with the company, culminating in a grand retirement gala at the Grand Meridian Hotel. As his daughter and a senior staff member, I was expected to help coordinate the festivities. Little did I know this event would change everything between us. The Grand Meridian's imperial ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and golden accents. 500 people filled the space, board members, executives, clients, and community leaders, all gathered to celebrate the legendary Richard Mitchell. Round tables with crisp white linens surrounded a central stage and dance floor. At the entrance, a 6-foot ice sculpture of the Westmore logo greeted guests. I'd spent weeks helping the events team prepare for this night, insisting on handling the tribute video myself. I interviewed colleagues, gathered photos from throughout his career, and even included childhood videos my mother had preserved. I wanted, despite everything, to make him proud. My black cocktail dress was conservative yet elegant, carefully chosen to meet my father's standards. "Nothing flashy," he'd warned when I mentioned the event. "This isn't about you." I stood, near the back during the cocktail hour, directing staff and ensuring everything ran smoothly. James worked the room like a natural politician, laughing loudly at the CEO's jokes, clapping executives on the back like old friends. "Sarah, darling!" Margaret Westmore, the founder's widow and chairman emeritus, approached with outstretched hands. "This event is simply marvellous. You've outdone yourself." "Thank you, Mrs. Westmore. That means a lot coming from you. Your father must be so proud of your work here, both tonight and with your recent promotion. Marketing director at 35. Exceptional." I smiled tightly. He certainly acknowledged it. Her eyes showed understanding. Margaret had known my father for 40 years. She knew exactly what acknowledged meant in Rick Mitchell's vocabulary. The formal program began at 8. I took my assigned seat at the family table near the stage, between James and my father's sister, Aunt Catherine. My father sat at the centre, already receiving congratulatory handshakes from passing colleagues. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Aunt Catherine whispered, squeezing my hand under the table. "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become." The CEO gave an opening speech, praising my father's contributions to the company. The CFO followed with humorous anecdotes about their early days together. Then came my video, a 15-minute celebration of Richard Mitchell's career and impact. I held my breath during the video, watching my father's face for any reaction. He maintained his usual stoic expression until a clip of him holding me as a baby, my mother laughing beside them. For just a moment, his facade cracked, revealing something softer. When the video ended, the room erupted in applause. The CEO returned to the podium and introduced my father for his retirement speech. And now, the man of the hour, the financial wizard who helped build Westmore into what it is today, Richard Mitchell. My father approached the stage to a standing ovation. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, his silver hair impeccably styled, he looked every inch the corporate titan. "Thank you, everyone. 45 years goes by in the blink of an eye when you're doing what you love." He began with the expected acknowledgements, thanking the board, the executive team, his mentors. He shared stories about Westmore's growth, the challenges they'd overcome, his vision for the company's future. Standard retirement speech fare, delivered with my father's characteristic authority. Then came the pivot. "I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my family tonight, my son James, who's already making his mark in our investment division, and my daughter Sarah, recently promoted to marketing director." I straightened in my seat, surprised at the acknowledgement. Family has taught me as much about leadership as business ever did. Sometimes the hardest lessons come from the people closest to you. Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. Take Sarah, for instance. Always determined to forge her own path, even when that path led to mistakes. The room grew quiet. James shifted uncomfortably beside me. Just last year, Sarah taught me an important lesson about professional boundaries when she became involved. With Thomas Becker, the head of our West Coast division, a married man, though Sarah claims she didn't know that at first. My blood ran cold. I'd confided in my father about Tom during a rare vulnerable moment, seeking fatherly advice after discovering Tom's marital status. I'd ended the relationship, immediately, devastated by the deception. That conversation happened in private in my father's study after I'd spent an hour crying. Now he was broadcasting it to the entire company. These kinds of judgment lapses remind us that credentials alone don't make a leader. Character matters. Discernment matters. 500 pairs of eyes turned toward me. I felt the heat of humiliation spread across my face and chest. The woman across the table, Tom's direct report, stared at me with undisguised shock. Sarah eventually made the right decision, of course, but not before creating quite a complicated situation, a teachable moment, as I like to call it. He continued speaking, but the words blurred as blood rushed in my ears. Through sheer force of will, I maintained a neutral expression, even managing a self-deprecating smile. Years of practice hiding my true feelings from my father served me well in that moment. When he finally returned to discussing business accomplishments, I excused myself from the table, walking calmly toward the restroom. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step measured and controlled until I pushed through the bathroom door. Once inside a stall, I pressed my forehead against the cool metal partition and allowed silent tears to fall. My chest heaved, with suppressed sobs. The bathroom door opened. "Did you hear what Rick Mitchell said about his daughter?" A woman's voice. "So awkward. I always thought Sarah was so professional." Another voice, vaguely familiar from accounting. "Sleeping with a married VP. Guess the promotion makes sense now." "Shh. Come on, that's not fair." "I'm just saying it explains a lot. She's always been riding on her father's coattails." I remained frozen in the stall until they left. Carefully, I repaired my makeup, practiced my pleasant expression in the mirror, and returned to the ballroom just as dessert was being served. "You okay?" James whispered. I nodded, lifting my champagne glass. Never better. But something had broken inside me, something that could never be repaired. The fluorescent lights of Westmore's offices seemed especially harsh the following Monday. I'd spent the weekend alternating between crying and staring numbly at my apartment ceiling, ignoring calls from James and friends who'd witnessed my humiliation. Stepping off the elevator onto the executive floor, I immediately noticed the hush that fell over the administrative assistant's desk cluster. Their eyes darted away when I looked in their direction. "Morning, Sarah," Marcus Chen, our HR director, approached with coffee in hand. "Got a minute?" Marcus had been at Westmore almost as long as I had. We'd started within months of each other, and he'd always been kind, one of the few people who treated me as Sarah the professional rather than Sarah the boss's daughter. I followed him to his office, accepting the spare coffee he offered. "How are you holding up?" he asked once the door closed. "I've been better. Did everyone hear?" "It was a company event with 500 people, so yes." His direct honesty was refreshing. "For what it's worth, most people think your father was completely out of line." I laughed bitterly. "That's a first." Marcus hesitated, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "There's something else you should know, Sarah. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but given what happened..." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Your father tried to block your promotion to marketing director." The words hit like a physical blow. "What?" "He approached the executive committee privately, suggested they consider external candidates, said the department needed fresh perspectives. But he congratulated me when it was announced. He said, 'He lost that battle. Margaret Westmore personally advocated for you, said your work spoke for itself.'" I set my coffee down, afraid I might drop it. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus met my eyes. "Because I'm tired of watching him undermine you, and because I suspect the retirement speech wasn't the first time." That conversation with Marcus lit a fuse. After he left for a meeting, I remained in his office, my mind racing. Had my father been actively sabotaging my career all along? The thought seemed paranoid, even for someone with my complicated family dynamics. But I needed to know. As marketing director, I had expanded system access privileges. That afternoon, while most of the executive team attended a quarterly planning session, I began searching. First, I examined my own personnel file, looking for performance reviews and promotion recommendations. Nothing unusual appeared. Consistent, exceeds expectations ratings, positive comments from supervisors. Then I searched the executive communication archive, filtering for emails mentioning my name. The archive was supposedly for business continuity purposes, ensuring no critical information was lost during transitions. I'd never had reason to access it before. What I found shattered any remaining illusions about my father. An email from 3 years ago to the then creative director. Sarah's campaign concepts need significant revision before presentation to clients. I've attached my suggested changes. The attached document completely altered my original work, making it nearly unrecognizable. Another email to HR when I applied for the associate director position. While Sarah has technical qualifications, I question her leadership abilities. Perhaps another year of development would be appropriate. The most damning evidence came from emails between my father and Vernon Atwood, the former marketing director, and my direct supervisor for 7 years. Dozens of exchanges discussing my work, with my father consistently undermining my contributions. The social media strategy was primarily Vernon's concept, though Sarah helped implement it. Let's present this as a department initiative rather than Sarah's project. I'd appreciate if you'd guide Sarah toward more conservative approaches. Her ideas, while creative, often miss our target demographic. But the betrayal extended beyond my professional life. I found an email to my former fiancé, David, from 4 years ago. David, I understand your concerns about Sarah's commitment issues. Her mother was similarly focused on career over family. I respect your decision to end the engagement and appreciate your discretion regarding our conversation. The company apartment will remain available until you secure new housing. My father had spoken with David before our breakup. He'd offered him company housing. The revelation made me physically ill. Digging deeper, I discovered my father had been monitoring my company email for years, receiving forwarded copies of my personal communications with colleagues. He'd intervened in my departmental transfer requests, project assignments, even my office location. The most shocking discovery came when I searched financial records. After my mother died, she left a trust for both James and me to be managed by my father until we turned 30. James had received his full inheritance on his 30th birthday. I'd attended the celebration. My 30th birthday had come and gone 5 years earlier, with no mention of any inheritance. According to the documents I found, my father had reinvested my trust into a family asset protection strategy. In reality, he'd used my inheritance to fund his pet investment projects while providing James with his full share. I printed key documents and saved others to a secure folder, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. But the final betrayal nearly broke me. In a folder marked Personal RM, I found emails between my father and Elaine Hargrove, David's mother, and a longtime family friend. Their correspondence revealed an affair that began shortly after my mother's death and continued for years, including during my relationship with David. One particular exchange dated 2 weeks before David ended our engagement. Elaine: I can't keep this secret from David anymore. He deserves to know about us before marrying Sarah. My father: David isn't right for Sarah anyway. She needs someone who can manage her stubborn streaks and career obsession. Tell him whatever you need to, but I'd prefer our relationship remain private. It would only complicate things unnecessarily. Everything suddenly made sense. David's abrupt change of heart, his vague explanations about different values, his refusal to consider couples counselling. My father and his mother had orchestrated the end of our relationship to protect their affair. I left the office early, unable to maintain my professional facade. In my apartment, I poured a glass of wine with trembling hands and called Dr. Wilson's emergency line. He's been sabotaging me my entire life, I told her when she called back. My career, my relationships, my inheritance, everything. Sarah, I'm so sorry. This is a profound betrayal. I want to destroy him, I whispered, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. That's a natural reaction, Dr. Wilson said carefully. But I'm concerned about what that would do to you. Revenge rarely brings the peace we hope for. What about justice? Doesn't he deserve consequences? Perhaps he does, but you deserve peace even more. Let's discuss this in person tomorrow. I agreed to the appointment, but knew I wouldn't wait to act. After decades of manipulation and control, my father had finally shown his true self to the world by humiliating me publicly. Now it was my turn to reveal his true nature to everyone who mattered. 3 days. That's how long I had before my father's official last day at Westmore. 3 days to compile evidence, craft my strategy, and prepare for the consequences that would inevitably follow. I called in sick the next morning, something I'd never done in my entire career. Then I created a project plan as detailed as any marketing campaign I'd ever developed. My first step was meeting with Dr. Wilson. Despite my determination to move forward with exposing my father, I needed her perspective on where healthy justice ended and destructive vengeance began. I understand wanting him to face consequences, Dr. Wilson said during our emergency session. What he's done, both recently and throughout your life, is emotional abuse. So you agree I should expose him? She adjusted her glasses thoughtfully. I believe in truth-telling as a healing mechanism, but revenge and truth-telling aren't always the same thing. What's the difference? I asked. Intent and outcome. Are you seeking to heal yourself and protect others from similar harm? Or are you primarily motivated by making him suffer? I considered her question seriously. Both, if I'm being honest. I want him to experience the humiliation he's caused me. But I also want to free myself from his manipulation, and I think people deserve to know who he really is. Then perhaps focus on truth-telling rather than maximizing pain. Share factual information, not exaggerations, and be prepared for the reality that some people may not believe you, no matter what evidence you present. I nodded, taking notes. I don't want to become like him. I don't want to lie or manipulate. That's a crucial distinction. She leaned forward. Sarah, whatever you decide, remember that your worth isn't determined by his recognition or anyone else's response to your truth. You're reclaiming your narrative, not creating a new battlefield. With Dr. Wilson's guidance helping me establish ethical boundaries, I returned home to gather evidence. For 12 hours straight, I organised the documents I'd discovered, categorising them by type of betrayal, career sabotage, financial manipulation, personal relationship interference. I recorded a video statement detailing my experience in my own words, being careful to distinguish between documented facts and my emotional responses. I wanted the evidence to speak for itself wherever possible. By midnight, I realised I needed more information, perspectives from others who might have witnessed my father's behaviour. The next morning, I began reaching out to former colleagues who had left Westmore over the years. Jennifer Alvarez, a former financial analyst who had worked closely with my department, agreed to meet for coffee. Your father blocked my promotion. 3 times, she told me, stirring her latte. When I finally confronted him, he said I should focus on work-life balance since I had young children. I left the following month. Would you be willing to provide a written statement about that experience? She hesitated only briefly. He can't hurt my career anymore. Yes, I'll do it. Throughout the day, I spoke with 7 former employees. 5 agreed to share their experiences of my father's manipulative leadership style, unethical practices, or inappropriate comments. Their testimonials painted a picture of a man who used people as pawns, discarding anyone who challenged him. My next call was to Thomas Mercer, a retired board member who had often clashed with my father on ethical issues. I'm not surprised, he said when I explained what I'd discovered. Your father was brilliant at financial strategy, but ruthless. In execution, the board censured him twice for pushing ethical boundaries. Did you know that? I hadn't known. Thomas directed me to board minutes documenting questionable financial decisions my father had championed, including several that had been reversed after his initial approval. By the second evening, I had assembled a comprehensive dossier on Richard Mitchell, the real man behind the corporate legend. But I was still missing a critical piece, my mother's perspective. After her death, my father had packed away most of her personal belongings, claiming it was too painful to have constant reminders. I'd been allowed to keep some jewellery and photographs, but her journals, letters, and personal papers had disappeared into the attic of our family home. I still had a key, rarely used. My father was attending a retirement dinner with clients that evening. I knew I'd have at least 3 hours. The attic was dusty and chaotic, filled with decades of accumulated possessions. I found what I was, seeking in a cedar chest beneath a stack of old Christmas decorations, 3 cardboard boxes labelled Elizabeth Personal. My hands trembled as I opened the first box. Inside were my mother's journals, dozens of them spanning from her college years through the final months of her life. I couldn't read them all, but I searched for entries around significant family events and the period before her death. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions while breaking my heart anew. My mother had been aware of my father's controlling behaviour toward me and had tried to shield me as best she could. She'd also documented his affairs, his financial manipulations, and her growing concern about his psychological impact on both her children. A journal entry from 2 months before her death read, "I worry most about Sarah after I'm gone. Rick's criticism is wearing her down, making her doubt herself. He sees her independence as defiance rather than strength. James adapts to Rick's expectations, becoming what his father wants, but Sarah remains steadfastly herself despite the cost. I admire her courage while fearing for her future. I've amended my will to protect her portion of the inheritance, but I know Rick will find ways around my wishes. I've written letters for both children to be given when they're older. They deserve to know they were loved unconditionally by at least one parent." Letters? I searched frantically through the boxes until I found a sealed envelope with my name, in my mother's handwriting. The letter inside, dated 1 month before her death, expressed her pride in me, her concerns about my father's influence, and her hopes for my future. She explicitly mentioned a separate trust she'd established with her brother, my Uncle Peter, as trustee. A trust my father apparently knew nothing about. I photographed key journal entries and carefully returned everything to its original location, taking only my letter and 1 journal volume that documented my father's financial misdeeds regarding my mother's estate. The final piece of my plan involved the presentation method. A simple email would be too easily dismissed or deleted. Printed documents could be thrown away. I needed something my father would definitely engage with, something he couldn't ignore. That's when I remembered his retirement gift. I'd been expected to contribute to the company's official gift, a golf club membership, but I had also prepared a personal gift, a digital photo frame I claimed contained family photos and career highlights. What my father didn't know was that I'd modified the device to include a hidden flash drive and programmed it to switch displays after 72 hours. For the first 3 days, it would show exactly what I'd promised, a rotating display of family, photos and career moments. But on the 4th day, when I would be safely out of town at a marketing conference in Chicago, the display would change to reveal instructions for accessing the flash drive hidden in the frame's base. I can tell you're wondering if this was the right decision. I questioned it myself many times during those planning days. Was I becoming just like my father, manipulative, calculating, willing to hurt others to get what I wanted? The line between justice and vengeance seemed increasingly blurred. But then I'd remember the retirement speech, the deliberate public humiliation, the years of undermining my work and relationships. I'd think about all the other people he'd hurt throughout his career. And I'd remember my mother's journals, her desperate attempts to protect me even after her death. If you've ever been systematically betrayed by someone who was supposed to love you, you understand the suffocating weight of keeping their secrets. Sometimes exposing the truth isn't about revenge, it's about finally being able to breathe. By the 3rd night, everything was ready. The modified photo frame was wrapped in silver paper with a card expressing generic well wishes. The flash drive contained organised folders of evidence: career sabotage, financial fraud, personal betrayals, mother's documentation, and testimonials. I made 3 backup copies of everything, one stored in a safe deposit box, one with Dr. Wilson, and one encrypted in cloud storage. Whatever happened next, the truth would survive. I also drafted emails to key people: the Westmore Board of Directors, the Compliance Department, my brother James, and a select few family members, scheduled to send automatically the morning after my father would discover the flash drive. As I finalised these preparations, I felt a strange calm replace my initial rage. This wasn't about hurting my father anymore. It was about freeing myself from his shadow once and for all. I wonder if any of you have faced a moment like this, when standing up for yourself feels both terrifying and necessary, when you realise that family loyalty has its limits, especially when that loyalty only flows in one direction. If you have your own story of setting boundaries with toxic family members, I'd love to hear about your experience in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles makes them a little easier to bear. Now let me tell you what happened next. The evening after my father's last official day at Westmore Financial, our family gathered for a private dinner at La Maison, his favourite French restaurant in the city. The setting was intimate. Just my father, James, Aunt Catherine, Uncle, Robert and me seated around a table in the restaurant's private dining room. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the antique wooden table, and soft classical music played in the background. I arrived 15 minutes early, the wrapped photo frame in a gift bag beside me. My stomach twisted with nerves, but years of hiding my true feelings from my father had prepared me for this performance. James arrived next, giving me a tentative hug. "How are you holding up after, "I'm fine," I said, offering the reassuring smile I'd practiced in the mirror. "It was embarrassing, but I'm moving past it." He studied my face, unconvinced. "You seem different." "Just tired. It's been a busy week." The others arrived shortly after, with my father making his customary grand entrance last. He wore an expensive, new suit, likely purchased with what should have been my inheritance money, and greeted each family member like a benevolent patriarch. When he reached me, he kissed my cheek, his cologne overwhelming. "Sarah, glad you could make it." As if I'd had a choice. As if skipping my father's retirement dinner wouldn't have consequences. "Wouldn't miss it, Dad," I replied, the words tasting bitter. The dinner proceeded with the usual family dynamics. James dominated the conversation with stories about his recent success landing a major client. Aunt Catherine asked polite questions about everyone's work. Uncle Robert, my mother's brother, remained mostly quiet, occasionally glancing at me with concern. I maintained my role perfectly, laughing at appropriate moments, asking thoughtful questions, appearing completely unaffected by the retirement speech humiliation. I even raised a toast to my father's career, praising his unforgettable impact on everyone around him. The double meaning went unnoticed by everyone except possibly Uncle Robert, who raised an eyebrow. After the main course, Aunt Catherine announced it was time for family gifts. She and Uncle Robert presented my father with an expensive watch. James gave him a rare bottle of scotch. Then it was my turn. "I wanted to give you something meaningful," I said, sliding the silver-wrapped package across the table. "Something that honours your legacy." My father unwrapped the digital photo frame, his expression neutral. "Thank you, Sarah." "It's preloaded with family photos and highlights from your career," I explained. "But there's a special feature. After 3 days, it switches to a new collection of memories, ones I've been gathering for years." That was the truth, technically. "It's also connected to cloud storage," I continued, "so I can update it remotely with new photos. The instruction manual is inside the box if you want to adjust any settings." My father set the frame aside with minimal interest. Very thoughtful. "You should plug it in as soon as you get home," I urged. "The battery only lasts about an hour. On its own." "I'll have Marjorie set it up," he said, referring to his housekeeper. "Actually, there are some personal memories included. Maybe set it up yourself. The digital display code is Mum's birthday." That detail caught his attention. My father had always been paranoid about household staff accessing personal information. I knew he'd set up the frame himself now, if only, to ensure Marjorie didn't see anything he considered private. Fine, he agreed. James watched our exchange with a puzzled expression. Since when are you into sentimental gifts, Sarah? I shrugged. People change. Speaking of change, I should mention I'll be out of town next week. Marketing conference in Chicago. The Digital Strategy Summit? My father asked, suddenly interested in my professional activities. Yes, I'm presenting our social media campaign results on Tuesday. This was another calculated detail. My father had always minimized my public speaking engagements. By mentioning I would be presenting, I guaranteed he wouldn't attend the conference. To undermine me. He'd already dismissed the importance of social media marketing numerous times. Well, good luck with that, he said dismissively. The old-fashioned approaches still work best in financial services. I smiled. That's why I've integrated traditional and digital strategies in my presentation, best of both worlds. Uncle Robert caught my eye across the table. Sounds impressive, Sarah. Your mother would be proud of your innovative thinking. A flash of annoyance crossed my father's face at the mention of my mother. He quickly changed the subject to his retirement plans, golf trips, consulting opportunities, his upcoming Mediterranean cruise. As coffee and dessert were served, I excused myself to use the restroom. Once alone, I leaned against the sink, taking deep breaths. The performance was draining but necessary. Just a few more hours of pretending, then I could retreat to prepare for my trip. When I returned, James was waiting in the hallway. What's really going on with you? He asked, blocking my path. You're being weird. I told you, I'm fine. No, you're not. You haven't been fine since Dad's speech, and this sudden trip, this strange gift, something's up. I sighed. James and I had never been close. My father had ensured that by constantly positioning us as competitors rather than allies. But in that moment, I almost told him everything. Almost. I'm just trying to move forward, James. Create some distance and perspective. He studied me for a long moment. Sarah, whatever you're planning, I'm not planning anything. I'm giving Dad a retirement gift and attending a conference. That's it. You're a terrible liar. You always have been. His tone wasn't accusatory, just matter of fact. Just be careful, okay? Dad isn't always fair to you, but he's still our father. The protective instinct toward our father, even after witnessing my public humiliation, spoke volumes about the family dynamic my father had created. James was as much a victim of my father's manipulation as I was, just in a different way. I know who he is, I said quietly. Better than you think. We returned to the table in uncomfortable silence. The remainder of the evening passed in, a blur of forced pleasantries and superficial conversation. When we finally said our goodbyes outside the restaurant, my father held me a moment longer than usual. I know I'm hard on you, Sarah. It's only because I see your potential. In the past, those words would have given me hope, made me believe that somewhere deep down he truly cared. Now I recognized them for what they were, another manipulation tactic. I know, Dad. That's why I wanted my gift to be special. Promise, you'll set it up tonight. If it's that important to you, fine. It is. And remember, Mum's birthday for the display code. As I watched his car pull away, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Just a hollow certainty that I was doing what needed to be done. Back in my apartment, I confirmed my flight to Chicago for Sunday afternoon. The timing was precise. My father would discover the flash drive Monday evening, giving me a solid alibi and physical distance when the revelation occurred. I sent a final text to my father. Hope you enjoy the frame. Each photo has a special memory attached. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts when I'm back from Chicago. His reply came quickly. Frame is on my desk. Pictures are fine. Have a productive trip. No, thank you. No acknowledgement of the effort. Just fine. The same dismissive response he'd given to every achievement throughout my life. It was the last normal communication we would ever have. I slept surprisingly well that night, better than I had in years. The weight of secrets and suppressed truths was lifting. For the first time since my mother died, I felt like I was honouring her memory properly, by finally standing up for myself. The next morning, I made final preparations for my trip, checked that all scheduled emails were set correctly, and called Dr. Wilson to confirm our virtual appointment for Monday evening. "Are you certain about this course of action?" she asked. "I am. It's not about revenge anymore. It's about truth." "And how do you feel?" I considered the question carefully. "Lighter, like I can finally stop performing the role of the dutiful daughter." "That's a significant realization, Sarah. Whatever happens next, remember that your worth isn't determined by his response." Those words would become my mantra in the difficult days ahead. Sunday afternoon, I boarded my flight to Chicago, leaving behind the photo frame that was silently counting down to Monday evening. In less than 36 hours, everything would change. The flash drive hidden in the digital photo frame contained 5 meticulously organised folders, each documenting a different aspect of my father's betrayal. I had spent hours ensuring the evidence was comprehensive yet accessible, with summary, documents for each section and clear file naming conventions. The first folder was labelled Career Sabotage and contained evidence of my father's systematic undermining of my professional development at Westmore Financial. The documents included forwarded emails showing my father instructing my supervisors to modify my work before presentation, performance review drafts with positive comments about my leadership that were removed in final versions, emails between my father and the executive committee opposing my promotion to marketing director, documentation of project ideas I'd presented that were later implemented under someone else's name, a spreadsheet tracking 23 instances where my father had taken credit for my department's successful campaigns, voice recordings from 2 meetings where my father dismissed my contributions in front of colleagues, statements from former employees describing how my father had undermined my authority, email threads showing my father redirecting my high-profile assignments to other team members. The summary document for this section included a timeline of my career at Westmore alongside specific sabotage incidents, highlighting the pattern of interference. The second folder, Financial Fraud, was potentially the most damaging from a legal perspective. It contained my mother's original will specifying equal distribution of assets between James and me, trust documents showing my inheritance should have been distributed when I turned 30, bank statements revealing my father's redirection of my trust funds into his personal investment accounts, emails between my father and his financial advisor discussing how to legally restructure my inheritance, documentation of the separate trust my mother had established with Uncle Robert that my father had attempted to access, comparative analysis of James's received inheritance versus my withheld funds, property, records showing my father had purchased a vacation home using my trust money, an accountant's confidential assessment, which I'd paid for privately, confirming misappropriation of approximately $850,000. The third folder was labelled Personal, Betrayals, and contained the most emotionally painful evidence. Email exchanges between my father and my ex-fiancé David in the weeks before our breakup. Documentation of my father offering David continued employment and housing after ending our engagement. Extensive correspondence between my father and Elaine Hargrove, David's mother, revealing their long-term affair. Evidence that my father had shared private information about me with Elaine. Messages showing my father had interfered in 3 other relationships before David. Records of my father monitoring my personal communications through company servers. Evidence that he had hired a private investigator to follow me during a vacation with friends. Statements from family friends describing how my father had systematically isolated me after my mother's death. The fourth folder, Mother's Documentation, was the most personally significant. Scanned pages from my mother's journals documenting my father's controlling behaviour, entries specifically addressing his different treatment of me versus James, journal entries detailing his affairs during their marriage, My mother's private notes about changes she had made to her will. To protect me. The letter she had written to me before her death, expressing her concerns about my father's influence. Documentation of financial arrangements she had made without my father's knowledge. Photos of family events with her. Handwritten notes on the back describing the reality behind the happy family images. Voice recordings my mother had secretly made during arguments with my father about his treatment of me. The final folder, testimonials, contained statements from people who had witnessed my father's behaviour. Written accounts from 7 former Westmore employees about my father's unethical business practices. Statements from 3 board members regarding questionable financial decisions. Testimony from family friends who had witnessed his controlling behaviour. Letters from 2 of my former boyfriends describing my father's interference in our relationships. A statement from my therapist, with my written permission, about the psychological impact of my father's emotional abuse. A detailed account from Uncle Robert about his observations of my father's behaviour since my mother's death. A video interview with Jennifer Alvarez detailing how my father had blocked her promotion due to her gender. A comprehensive statement from me explaining the pattern of control and manipulation throughout my life. At the root level of the flash drive was a single Word document titled, "Read Me First." This file explained the organisation of the evidence and included a personal statement. "Dad, this isn't about revenge, it's about truth. For decades, you've controlled the narrative of our family and my life. You've presented yourself as the supportive father while actively undermining my career, stealing my inheritance and sabotaging my personal relationships. The evidence in these folders is unaltered and factual. I haven't manipulated or exaggerated anything. The truth speaks for itself. I don't expect an apology. I don't even expect you to acknowledge what you've done. This is simply me reclaiming my story and setting the record straight." By the time you read this, the same information will have been shared with the Westmore Board of Directors, Compliance Department, and key family members. This isn't negotiable or open to your typical manipulation tactics. For what it's worth, I didn't want things to end this way. I spent my entire life trying to earn your approval and love. It took your public humiliation of me at your retirement speech to finally make me see that was never going to happen. Sarah. In addition to the flash drive in the digital frame, I had created identical packages for several key recipients. James would receive his copy via certified mail scheduled for delivery Tuesday morning. The Westmore Board of Directors would receive theirs through secure corporate channels. Uncle Robert already had his copy, delivered personally during a private meeting before my departure. The Compliance Department at Westmore would receive a redacted version focusing solely on financial improprieties. My attorney held a complete copy in case of legal repercussions. Each recipient's package was customised slightly, with cover letters explaining why they were receiving this information and what sections were most relevant to them. For James, I included a separate letter. "James, I know this will be difficult to process. Dad has positioned us as competitors our entire lives, but we don't have to continue that pattern. You didn't create the favouritism that defined our childhood. He did. I'm not sharing this to hurt you or damage your relationship with Dad. I'm sharing it because we both deserve to know the truth about our family. Mum wanted us to support each other. The attached journal entries show how concerned she was about Dad's manipulation of both of us. Whether you believe the evidence or not is your choice. I've verified everything multiple times and stand by its authenticity. I hope someday we can have an honest conversation about our shared experiences. Your sister, Sarah." For the Board of Directors, the focus was professional. To the Westmore Financial Board of Directors, I regret that my first direct communication with you must be under these circumstances. The attached documentation reveals a pattern of unethical behaviour by Richard Mitchell that directly impacts Westmore's legal and financial standing. Sections 2 and 5 detail financial improprieties that may have regulatory implications. I've provided this information out of duty to the company and its shareholders, not for personal gain or vendetta. I understand this creates a complex situation given my current position as marketing director. I am prepared to take a temporary leave of absence while you review these materials if that would be appropriate. Respectfully, Sarah Mitchell. The Compliance Department received the most formal package. Westmore Financial Compliance Department, please find attached documentation regarding potential violations of company policy and financial regulations by former executive Richard Mitchell. This information is being provided in accordance with Westmore's whistleblower protocol. I am available to discuss any questions regarding these materials upon my return from business travel on Wednesday. Sarah Mitchell, Marketing Director. Uncle Robert's package included additional personal context. Uncle Robert, thank you for always being a quiet source of support, especially after Mum died. I now understand why you often seemed concerned about Dad's influence on me. The enclosed materials confirm what I believe you've suspected for years. I've included the pages from Mum's journal, where she mentions the separate trust she established with you as trustee. I'd like to discuss this when things settle down. Whatever happens next, please know I'm finally standing up for myself in the key way Mum would have wanted. Love, Sarah. As the digital frame sat on my father's desk, cycling through carefully selected family photos, it was silently counting down to Monday evening, when the display would change to reveal instructions for finding the flash drive hidden in its base. The timer was set for exactly 72 hours after activation, meaning my father would discover the evidence at approximately 8:30 p.m. Monday evening, while I was safely in Chicago with multiple witnesses to my whereabouts. The automated emails to all recipients were scheduled for 7 a.m. Tuesday morning, giving my father approximately 10 hours to process the information before others received their copies. I had considered every detail, anticipated every possible reaction. What I couldn't predict was how it would feel once the truth was finally exposed, whether the release of these long-held secrets would bring healing or simply a different kind of pain. Monday evening arrived with an eerie calm. I sat in my Chicago hotel room, staring at my phone. It was 8:37 p.m. The digital frame would have changed its display 7 minutes ago. My father would be discovering the instructions to access the hidden flash drive. At 8:42 p.m, my phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. The message came through moments later. Sarah, call me immediately. What the hell is this? 3 more calls followed in rapid succession. I silenced my phone and opened my laptop for my scheduled video session with Dr. Wilson. Has it happened? She asked when her face appeared on screen. Yes, he's calling repeatedly. I'm not answering. How are you feeling? Strangely numb, I admitted. I expected to feel something more dramatic, triumph maybe, or guilt, but I just feel empty. We spent the hour discussing healthy boundaries for the confrontation that would inevitably come. I agreed not to engage with my father until I returned to the city and could meet in a public place with support nearby. By morning, I had 17 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and 23 text messages, all from my father. The earliest messages were angry demands for explanation. By 3 a.m, they had shifted to attempts at manipulation. I don't know what you think you found, but you're misinterpreting everything. This could destroy the family. Is that what you want? Your mother would be ashamed of this betrayal. The final message, sent at 5:47 a.m, simply read, "We need to talk before you do something you'll regret." Too late. At 7 a.m, the automated emails delivered copies of the evidence to everyone on my list. By 7:30 a.m, my phone was lighting up with messages from other recipients. James. What the actual fuck, Sarah? Is this real? Dad's saying you're having some kind of breakdown. Margaret Westmore. Sarah, I've received your materials. The board is convening an emergency meeting at 11 a.m. Please call me when you can. Uncle Robert. I always suspected, but never had proof. I'm so sorry, kiddo. I'm here when you're ready. To talk. The Westmore Compliance Director. Ms. Mitchell, we've received your documentation and have initiated our whistleblower protection protocols. Please secure any additional evidence you may have. By noon, word had spread throughout Westmore's executive ranks. Marcus texted, Holy shit, Sarah. The office is in chaos. Rick's attorney showed up demanding access to his old emails. Board members are huddled in the conference room. What did you do? I maintained my silence, attending my conference sessions. As planned, presenting my marketing strategy to industry colleagues who had no idea of the corporate earthquake I'd just triggered. That evening, James called again. This time, I answered. Dad showed me the evidence, he said, his voice tight. He says you manipulated the emails, that you're trying to destroy him because of the retirement speech. Do you believe him? I asked quietly. A long pause. I don't know what to believe. The stuff about Mum's trust. I had no idea you never received your inheritance. That's just one piece of it, James. And the affair with David's mother? Is that part true? All of it's true. I verified everything multiple times. He exhaled heavily. Jesus, Sarah, why didn't you ever say anything? Would you have believed me over Dad? Be honest. Another silence. Probably not, he finally admitted. He's always been Dad, you know, larger than life, unquestionable. That was by design. The board is freaking out about the financial stuff. There's talk of an external audit. I wasn't surprised. The financial improprieties were the most legally actionable aspects of my father's behaviour. Sarah, he's falling apart. I've never seen him like this. He's alternating between rage and panic. He showed up at my apartment at 6 a.m, demanding I help him fix this. There's no fixing it, James. The truth is the truth. He wants to meet with you when you get back. Says he can explain everything. I'm sure he thinks he can, I replied. The calls and messages continued throughout Tuesday. Aunt Catherine left a tearful voicemail saying she'd had no idea about any of it, especially the misappropriation of my inheritance. 2 board members sent formal emails requesting meetings upon my return. The compliance department scheduled an interview for Thursday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, I was preparing to return to the city when Marcus called with an update. The board has frozen your father's retirement package pending investigation, he reported. The preliminary review of the financial documents you provided confirmed enough to warrant a full audit. They've also reached out to regulatory authorities as a preemptive measure. What's happening with my position? I asked, suddenly concerned about potential blowback. You're protected under whistleblower statutes, but Margaret suggested you might want to take a paid leave during the investigation, not as punishment, for your own well-being. I agreed to the leave, relieved to have space from the corporate fallout. My return flight landed Wednesday evening. As I exited the secure area, I half expected to see my father waiting, ready to confront me. Instead, Uncle Robert stood near baggage claim, a reassuring presence. Thought you might want some backup, he said, hugging me. Your father's been trying to find out when you'd return. How bad is it? Bad enough. He's called every family member trying to build support. Most are just shocked, trying to process it all. Your mother's journals. Those were hardest for people to dismiss. Has he admitted to anything? Uncle Robert shook his head. He's claiming misunderstandings, contexts removed, evidence manipulated. Classic Rick. Deny, deflect, discredit. And the trust Mum set up with you? A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. I should have told you years ago. Elizabeth made me promise to protect that money until you were truly independent from your father. I've been managing it, growing it. It's ready whenever you are. Tears welled in my eyes. The first I'd shed since implementing my plan. My mother had tried to protect me, even from beyond the grave. And she'd succeeded, through her brother's loyalty. Uncle Robert drove me to a hotel rather than my apartment. Your father went there looking for you yesterday, he explained. Better to stay somewhere he won't think to check. I spent Thursday, morning with the compliance team, walking through the financial documentation and answering their questions. By afternoon, news had spread through company channels that Richard Mitchell was under investigation for financial improprieties and ethical violations. James texted, Dad's attorney advised him not to contact you directly anymore. He's freaking out about the board freezing his retirement package. Then, hours later, the audit team found more than what you even included. There's a pattern going. Back years. Friday morning brought news that the board had referred my father's case to federal authorities for potential securities violations. His carefully constructed reputation was unravelling thread by thread. Professionally, the consequences were swift and severe. Personally, the impact rippled through family connections and social circles. Longtime family friends chose sides. Country. Club memberships suddenly had administrative issues. Dinner invitations disappeared. My father made one last desperate attempt to regain control. He called a family meeting at his home, inviting everyone except me. According to James, who attended briefly, my father presented a slideshow titled Sarah's Misunderstandings, attempting to reframe the evidence as benign actions taken for my own good. It was painful to watch, James told me over coffee the following week. No one was buying it. Aunt Catherine actually stood up and left in the middle, said she couldn't listen to any more lies. By the second week, my father had retreated from public view entirely. His attorney issued a statement that Mr. Mitchell was cooperating with all investigations and looked forward to clearing his name. His house went dark, blinds drawn, security system upgraded. The third week brought news that the federal investigation had expanded to include my father's handling of certain client accounts. Former colleagues began distancing themselves publicly, issuing carefully worded statements about their limited involvement in his department's decisions. Through it all, I maintained my distance, processing the seismic shifts with Dr. Wilson's help. What surprised me most wasn't the professional consequences. I'd anticipated those. It was the personal transformation I was experiencing. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The constant need for approval, the second-guessing, the fear of disappointing my father, it all began to fade. I started making decisions based solely on my own values and desires, a novel experience, at 35. 1 month after the revelation, James called with news that our father had shown up at his apartment, looking haggard and desperate. He wanted me to arrange a meeting with you, James said. He says he's ready to apologise. Do you believe him? A pause. No. I think he's realised he can't fix this with his usual tactics and is trying a new approach. I considered the request. Carefully. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain the clean break I'd established. But another part recognised that a final conversation might provide closure, for me, if not for him. Tell him I'll meet him, I decided, but on my terms. During the weeks following my return from Chicago, as my father's carefully constructed world crumbled, I experienced my own metamorphosis. The changes were both subtle and profound, unfolding in quiet moments when I least expected them. The first change I noticed was physical. The persistent tension headaches that had plagued me for years, so constant I'd stopped registering them as abnormal, suddenly vanished. My sleep improved dramatically. The grinding jaw pain from unconscious, teeth clenching disappeared. Your body is releasing years of stored stress, Dr. Wilson explained during one of our sessions. When we're constantly in survival mode around toxic people, our nervous systems never fully relax. What you're experiencing is your system finally recognizing you're safe. My apartment became a sanctuary rather than just a place to sleep between workdays. With my paid leave from Westmore providing unexpected free time, I redecorated, replacing the neutral, inoffensive decor I'd chosen to avoid my father's criticism with colours and patterns that brought me joy. The living room walls, previously beige, now glowed a rich teal. Abstract art, a passion I'd abandoned in college at my father's insistence, adorned the walls. One rainy afternoon, I found myself clearing out my closet, discarding the conservative wardrobe I'd cultivated to meet my father's standards of professional appearance. The structured suits, sensible pumps and muted colours gave way to clothes, chosen purely for my own pleasure, comfortable, colourful, expressive. Marcus visited during my third week of leave, bringing office updates and genuine concern. You look different, he said, studying me across the coffee table. More present, Somehow, I smiled, I feel different, like I've been holding my breath for decades and finally remembered how to exhale. The compliance team wants you to know they're impressed with your documentation. Very thorough, very professional. Will there be criminal charges? I asked. Marcus nodded grimly. The federal investigation uncovered patterns of financial manipulation beyond what you documented. The US Attorney's Office is involved now. I felt a momentary pang, not of regret, but of sadness for what could have been. My father had possessed such talent, such potential to create positive impact. Instead, he'd used his abilities to control and manipulate. What about you? Marcus asked. Are you planning to return to Westmore? It was a question I'd been asking myself repeatedly. The company had treated the situation appropriately, invoking whistleblower protections and maintaining professional boundaries. But Westmore was inextricably linked with my father in my mind. Every conference room, every elevator ride, every logo would remind me of decades spent seeking approval I'd never receive. I don't think so, I said, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. It's time for something new. The something new arrived unexpectedly the following day. Charlotte Way, CEO of Meridian Partners, Westmore's most innovative competitor, reached out through LinkedIn with a direct message. Sarah, I've followed your marketing work for years and have always been impressed. Recent events at Westmore have no bearing on your professional reputation, which remains stellar. I'd love to discuss a role leading our marketing division when you're ready to consider new opportunities. 5 years earlier, I'd declined a similar overture from Meridian, unwilling to risk my father's disapproval by joining a competitor. The memory of that decision, one of dozens made to appease him, strengthened my resolve to chart a different course now. My relationship with James evolved during this period as well. One evening he appeared at my door with takeout and an awkward determination to talk. I've been going through old photos, he said, spreading a collection across my coffee table. Looking for the truth I missed. The images showed our family through the years, holidays, graduations, vacations. In nearly every photo, the pattern was visible once you knew to look for it. James positioned prominently beside our father, me slightly apart or partially obscured, our mother often between us like a buffer. He constructed our entire relationship, James said, voice rough with emotion. I never questioned why he always praised me for minimal effort while criticizing you for exceptional work. I just accepted the roles he assigned us. We both did, I replied gently. You didn't create the dynamic, but I benefited from it. Financially, professionally, emotionally. He met my eyes directly. I'm sorry, Sarah, for not seeing it sooner, for not being the brother you deserved. That conversation marked the beginning of a genuine siblinghood, something we'd never experienced under our father's manipulative influence. We began meeting weekly, sometimes talking about the past, sometimes focusing on rebuilding for the future. During one such dinner, James revealed he was considering leaving Westmore as well. I keep questioning whether I actually earned my position, or if it was just Dad's influence. I need to find out what I can achieve on my own merits. My reconnection with James led to other healing relationships. Aunt Catherine, my mother's sister, invited me for a weekend at her lake house, where she shared stories about my mother I'd never heard, her college activism, her artistic talents, her quiet determination. Elizabeth worried constantly about Rick's influence on you, she confided as we walked along the shoreline. She saw his controlling nature more clearly than anyone. Those journals, they confirmed what she tried to tell us before she died, but in ways we couldn't dismiss as end-of-life confusion. One of the most unexpected changes came in my connection to my mother. Through her journals and the letters Uncle Robert finally shared, I developed a relationship with her that transcended her physical absence. Her words validated my experiences, offered guidance she hadn't been able to provide in person, and revealed a woman of remarkable courage and foresight. You were always the stronger one, she had written in her final letter to me. Rick saw that strength as a threat. I see it as your salvation. Trust yourself, Sarah. Your instincts are sound. Your heart is true, When the time comes to stand your ground, remember I am standing with you." Those words became a touchstone as I navigated my new reality. Professional opportunities continued to emerge. Beyond Charlotte Way's offer from Meridian, I received inquiries from 3 other financial marketing firms and 2 fintech startups. The freedom to consider these options without calculating my father's reaction was exhilarating and terrifying. Dr. Wilson helped me recognize that my hesitation stemmed from unfamiliarity with autonomous decision-making rather than actual uncertainty. "You've spent your life filtering choices through the lens of your father's approval," she observed. "It's natural to feel adrift when that external reference point is removed. This is an opportunity to develop your internal compass." That perspective helped me approach the decision methodically. I created a matrix of what mattered most to me in my next professional chapter: creative freedom, ethical leadership, work-life balance, growth potential, and mission alignment. After interviewing with all 6 companies, Meridian Partners emerged as the clear match. Their marketing approach valued innovation over tradition, their leadership team included several women in key positions, and their flexible work policies acknowledged employees as whole people with lives beyond the office. When I accepted Charlotte's offer as Executive Marketing Director, with a substantial salary increase and equity options, I experienced none of the anxiety that had accompanied previous career moves. For the first time, my professional decision felt entirely my own. My personal growth extended to relationships as well. I reconnected with friends who had drifted away during my years of work-centered existence. I joined a community art class, rediscovering the joy of creative expression I'd abandoned at my father's urging. Most significantly, I began dating again, approaching relationships with new awareness of healthy boundaries and authentic connection. I no longer sought partners my father would approve of, instead focusing on genuine compatibility and mutual respect. Through it all, I maintained my distance from my father. His attempts at contact grew less frequent as the legal consequences of his actions intensified. According to James, he vacillated between rage, self-pity, and calculated attempts to rebuild his narrative. The federal investigation expanded to include tax evasion charges related to the misappropriation of my inheritance. The Westmore board voted unanimously to rescind his retirement honours and remove his portrait from the executive gallery. Former associates distanced themselves publicly as more details emerged about his unethical business practices. 6 weeks. After my return from Chicago, as I prepared for my first day at Meridian Partners, James called with news that our father had reached out to his attorney about a settlement offer regarding my inheritance. "He's trying to make the financial issues go away," James explained. "His lawyer contacted Uncle Robert about the trust Mum set up for you." "Too late," I replied. "That was never about the money." "I know, but I think he's finally realizing he can't control the narrative anymore. He's asking to meet with you, says he wants to explain his side before things go any further." I considered the request carefully. The Sarah who had existed 2 months earlier would have jumped at any opportunity for paternal acknowledgement or explanation. That Sarah no longer existed. "What do you think?" I asked James, a new dynamic in our relationship, seeking his perspective. As an equal rather than as my father's preferred child. "I think he's desperate," James said after a thoughtful pause. "But I also think you might benefit from saying what you need to say to his face, not for him, for you." That insight resonated. Throughout my life, I'd swallowed words, buried feelings, and hidden my truth to maintain my father's approval. Perhaps a final conversation conducted on my terms would complete my liberation. "Tell him I'll meet him," I decided, "but I choose when and where." As I prepared for this confrontation, I reflected on my journey since the retirement speech humiliation. The woman who had sat frozen in that ballroom, smiling through public degradation, would have been unrecognizable to me now. I had reclaimed, not just my narrative but my entire self, my professional identity, my personal values, my authentic voice. The path forward remained uncertain in many ways, but for the first time, that uncertainty felt like possibility rather than threat. The evening before my scheduled meeting with my father, I stood before my bathroom mirror, studying my reflection. The physical changes were subtle, more relaxed posture, brighter eyes, easier smile, but they reflected a fundamental transformation within. I am my mother's daughter, I said to my reflection, remembering her words. When the time comes to stand your ground, remember I am standing with you. For the first time in my adult life, I truly believed I was enough, exactly as I was. Not Richard Mitchell's disappointing daughter, not Westmore's marketing director, not anyone's reflection or extension, just Sarah, complete and worthy in my own right. That realization, more than any external consequence my father faced, was the true victory. I chose Riverside Park for our meeting, neutral territory, with enough public presence to discourage dramatics but sufficient privacy for honest conversation. The late afternoon sunshine cast long shadows across the walking paths as I arrived. 15 minutes early, selecting a bench overlooking the water. My preparation for this encounter had been thorough. I'd role-played various scenarios with Dr. Wilson, established clear boundaries with James about what information I was willing to receive from our father afterward, and even rehearsed exit strategies if the conversation became manipulative. I wore a cobalt blue dress I'd purchased during my recent closet overhaul, something my father had never seen, something chosen purely for my own pleasure. My mother's simple silver pendant hung at my throat, a tangible connection to her strength. At exactly 4 o'clock, I spotted him approaching along the river path. My breath caught momentarily. The physical transformation in my father was shocking. Richard Mitchell had always been the embodiment of powerful presence, impeccably groomed, expensively dressed, posture radiating authority. The man walking toward me looked diminished. His designer suit hung loosely on his frame. His normally perfect silver hair appeared unwashed. Deep lines etched his face, and the confident stride had been replaced by a tentative gait. For a moment, I felt an unwelcome pang of pity. I breathed through it, remembering Dr. Wilson's warning. Compassion is appropriate, taking responsibility for his feelings is not. He spotted me and paused briefly before continuing forward. I remained seated, not rising to greet him, a small but deliberate choice. Sarah. He stood awkwardly before the bench, clearly expecting me to invite him to sit. After a moment of silence, I gestured to the space beside me. Dad. He lowered himself onto the bench, maintaining careful distance between us. Up close, the changes were even more apparent. His eyes, usually sharp and assessing, appeared clouded with exhaustion. You look well, he offered, his voice rougher than I remembered. I am well. Silence stretched between us. In the past, I would have rushed to fill it, to ease his discomfort. Today, I waited. Your brother said you're starting at Meridian next week, he finally continued. Executive Marketing Director. Congratulations. Thank you. More silence. A jogger passed. Birds called from nearby trees. My father cleared his throat. I assume you know the federal investigation has expanded. Tax evasion, securities fraud. They're talking about criminal charges. I nodded but offered no response. My attorney thinks we can reach a settlement on the inheritance issues, he continued, slipping into business mode. If you're willing to sign an NDA regarding the personal matters, we could... I didn't come here to negotiate, I interrupted. There will be no NDA, no settlement discussions. The financial issues are between you and the authorities now. His jaw tightened, a familiar precursor to anger. Then why did you agree to meet? Closure, I said simply. For me, not for you. Sarah, you have to understand. No, I cut him off again, my voice calm but firm. I don't have to understand anything. For 35 years I tried to understand. I twisted myself into knots trying to comprehend why my father, who should have been my greatest advocate, consistently undermined, criticized, and sabotaged me. His eyes darted away, unable to hold my steady gaze. What I eventually understood is that your behavior was never about my shortcomings. It was about your own insecurities, your need for control, your inability to see me as a person separate from yourself. That's not fair, he protested. I pushed you because I saw your potential. I wanted you to be exceptional. No. You pushed me because you couldn't tolerate my independence. You saw my potential as a threat rather than a source of pride. He shook his head dismissively. The gesture so familiar, it almost made me smile. Even now, facing the consequences of his actions, Richard Mitchell couldn't conceive of being wrong. Let me ask you something, I said, shifting slightly to face him directly. Did you ever, even once, consider how your actions affected me? Not how they would shape me into what you wanted, but how they made me feel as a human being? His silence was answer enough. You humiliated me at your retirement speech, I continued. You took a private vulnerability I shared with you and weaponized it in front of hundreds of colleagues. Did you think about what that would do to me professionally, personally? I was trying to illustrate a point about judgment. You were asserting control, I corrected. I had achieved something you couldn't undermine directly, my promotion, so you undermined me personally instead. A muscle jumped in his jaw, but he remained silent. That night broke something in me, I admitted. But it also freed me, because I finally saw with perfect clarity that nothing I ever did would be enough. No achievement, no sacrifice, no compromise would ever earn your genuine approval or protection. That's not true, he insisted, but the protest sounded hollow even to my ears. It is true, I said quietly. The evidence speaks for itself. You sabotaged my career while pretending to support it. You stole my inheritance while acting as its protector. You interfered in my relationships while claiming to want my happiness. For a moment, anger flashed in his eyes, the familiar intimidation tactic that had silenced me countless times before. But when I didn't flinch or look away, the fire faded, replaced by something I'd never seen in my father's expression. Uncertainty. What do you want from me, Sarah? He asked, his voice suddenly tired. An apology? Money? My professional destruction is nearly complete. What more are you looking for? The question hung between us as I considered my honest answer. I don't want anything from you, I finally replied. That's what you don't understand. For my entire life, I wanted your approval, your respect, your unconditional love. I don't want those things anymore because I've realized they were never available to me. He flinched as if I'd struck him. I came today to tell you that I forgive myself, I continued. I forgive myself for believing I was somehow deficient. I forgive myself for accepting your narrative about who I was and what I deserved. I forgive myself for staying silent for so many years. And me? He asked quietly. Do you forgive me? The question surprised me. In all my preparation with Dr. Wilson, we'd never anticipated my father asking for forgiveness. I don't know, I answered. Honestly, forgiveness requires accountability. You'd need to genuinely understand and acknowledge the harm you caused. I'm not sure you're capable of that. We sat in silence for several minutes, the river flowing steadily before us, people passing on the walking path behind our bench. In that silence, I felt a shift, not reconciliation, but a rebalancing of power that had been disproportionately his for decades. I was jealous, he said suddenly, the words so unexpected I wasn't sure I'd heard correctly. What? Of you and your mother, your connection. He stared straight ahead, not meeting my eyes. Elizabeth understood you in ways I never could. You were so much like her, creative, intuitive, strong-willed. I felt excluded. The admission was so human, so ordinary compared to the mythology I'd built around his motives, that it momentarily disarmed me. So you punished me for it? He shook his head slowly. I didn't see it that way. I thought I was correcting a course, making you practical, making you like me. It seemed necessary. It wasn't, I said simply. No, he exhaled heavily. It wasn't. Another silence fell between us, less charged than before. The financial improprieties, I finally said, those weren't about me. No. He straightened slightly, professional mask slipping back into place. Those were complicated situations. They were crimes, I corrected gently. And they're not why I'm here today. He nodded once, accepting the boundary. James tells me you're starting at Meridian next week, he said, changing the subject. Charlotte Way has a solid reputation. Smart choice. The comment was so normal, so fatherly that I almost laughed at the incongruity. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. You'll do well there. He cleared his throat. You would have done well anywhere. Your work at Westmore was exceptional, despite my interference. The closest thing to acknowledgement I'd ever received from him. Too little, too late, yet somehow still meaningful in its way. Thank you for saying that. He checked his watch, a nervous habit I recognised from childhood dinner tables. I should probably go. My attorney is expecting an update. About the NDA that isn't happening, I clarified. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Yes, about that. He stood, suddenly, awkward again. Is this the last time we'll speak? The question carried more vulnerability than I'd ever heard from Richard Mitchell. I considered my answer carefully. I don't know, I replied honestly. That depends on many things. I'm establishing a new life based on truth and healthy boundaries. If you can respect those boundaries, perhaps we can have some form of communication eventually. He nodded, accepting the non-commitment. I am sorry, Sarah, he said quietly. Not for everything. I'm not there yet, but for the retirement speech, for publicly humiliating you. That was unforgivable. The partial apology was more than I'd expected and less than I deserved. I accepted it as what he was capable of offering in this moment. Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye, Sarah. I remained on the bench as he walked away, his figure gradually disappearing along the river path. The encounter had been neither the dramatic confrontation nor the emotional reconciliation I might once have imagined. Instead, it was something more valuable, an exchange between equals. 2 weeks later, I stood before a conference room of new colleagues at Meridian Partners. Charlotte Way had just completed my introduction as the new executive marketing director, and 30 expectant faces turned toward me, waiting for my opening remarks. Thank you for that warm welcome, I began, my voice steady and confident. I'm excited to join Meridian at this pivotal moment in financial services marketing. Before I outline my vision for our department, I want to share a core principle that will guide my leadership. Authenticity drives connection. As I continued my presentation, I felt completely present in a way I'd never experienced professionally. No more calculating how my father would judge each word. No more second-guessing my instincts. No more diminishing my ideas to avoid threatening fragile male egos. Just Sarah Mitchell, speaking her truth with clarity and purpose. The meeting concluded with enthusiastic questions and engaged discussion. As people filed out, Charlotte lingered. Behind. Impressive start, she said. The team's energized. You bring a fresh perspective we've needed. Thank you for taking a chance on me, given the circumstances. She waved away my concern. I didn't hire Richard Mitchell's daughter. I hired Sarah Mitchell, the marketing strategist whose campaigns I've admired for years. The fact that you had the courage to expose unethical behaviour only confirmed your integrity. We walked together toward my new office, a corner space with windows overlooking the city. So different from my carefully positioned office at Westmore, deliberately located away from the executive corridor at my father's direction. By the way, Charlotte added, your brother submitted his resume last week. Impressive credentials. I smiled, thinking of James's journey toward his own independence. He's more talented than he realises. My father's shadow obscured that for both of us. Well, Meridian evaluates people on their own merits. I'll have HR schedule an interview. As Charlotte departed, I paused in my office doorway, taking in the blank canvas before me. The space represented everything I'd fought for, Professional recognition based on talent rather than nepotism, freedom from manipulation, the opportunity to create something authentic. On my desk sat a small package that had been delivered that morning. Inside was a leather-bound journal with a note from Uncle Robert. Your mother kept journals her entire life. I thought you might want to continue the tradition. Your voice matters. I opened to the first blank page and began to write. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter, one authored entirely by me. The story of Sarah Mitchell, the real Sarah Mitchell, was just beginning. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't see your true worth? The journey I've shared today wasn't easy, but standing in my truth finally set me free from decades of manipulation. If my story resonated with you at all, please hit the like button so others dealing with similar family dynamics might find it. Leave a comment sharing your own experience with family karma or how you've navigated complex family relationships. Your story matters too. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more real-life accounts of finding strength after betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey from family scapegoat to the woman I was always meant to be. Remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is the one you finally give yourself.